Okay, we might get started. Welcome to this session, which is a session on the work we've been doing with some of the specialist science and math centres and the museum. This is the way these sessions are organised is that each session is notionally run by one of the universities, one of the four universities. This one is run by Deakin, but because this is a collaborative project, of course, there have been, in this case, there'll be La Trobe and Melbourne and Deakin presenting at the various projects we've been doing with the specialist centres and the museum. Monash, of course, also has a number of projects that they've been doing over a number of years around this sort of work. So there's a lot of talk between us, and you'll see the sort of variety of things that we've been doing. In particular, a couple of the projects have been collaborative between Melbourne and Deakin. Let's just have a look at some of the background to this project. My name's Russell Tytler, by the way. I'm a science educator from Deakin and have been in this STEM space for some years, and we've all been grappling, in a sense, with teacher education and teacher training around STEM and some of the issues that both Stephen and Leonie talked about. I'm going to take it back a step and just look at some of the key outcomes that we were looking for in this project, just so that you understand the logic of what we're trying to do and what we see as important in the work we're doing to answer some of the challenges that have been talked about in the first session. And I'm not going to read these out, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things. First of all, that we're looking to develop practices, or teacher education practices, that link with contemporary practices in sciences, in the sciences. And we're doing that in conjunction with developing approaches to teaching and learning pedagogies that we see as innovative and inquiry-based. So in a way, what our program is to bring some of the practices in science and maths at the cutting edge into teacher education. And I think that's very consistent with the vision of Ian Chubb and the vision of a lot of the scientists who are concerned with education in maths and science. That in fact, if we can somehow capture the way that science and maths is practiced at that cutting edge and get that into schools, then we've got a much better chance of both engaging and exciting our students in schools, and also of developing in them the problem-solving skills, the flexibility in dealing with some of the issues that Leonie was talking about, and shift from a practice in schools that tends to focus on straight knowledge. So practice is an important concept here. And the notion of cutting edge or innovative pedagogies has to do with inquiry-based, certainly from a few of us working in this project, has to do with developing students' capacity to generate representations like graphical work, like modelling, those sorts of things, and so try and capture that. And the other thing I think I'd like you to note in what is being presented is this fourth point, that what we're doing involves a meaningful collaboration between science and education faculties. And I think all of us have had these collaborative projects before, but ReMSTEP has been particularly powerful, and I think one of its legacies will be that we are talking much more across that science, mathematics, research in faculties with education. One of the things that when we actually thought through what we were wanting to do in this project and the variety of things we might do, we came up with this notion, in fact it was David Clark who's going to speak later, this notion of sites of pedagogical innovation. If we're looking at new approaches to teaching and learning, in what setting will we do this? And these are the 7 sites that we felt were important that we could usefully focus on. So there were integrated pre-service units of study, and we're doing work with that, certainly Deakin and other universities. We're looking for ways of engaging undergraduate science students with schools. and so to try and build that pipeline going into teaching and build the bank of people who are interested in that, and so on. The one in this session, though, that we're going to be focusing on is this collaboration with specialist science and technology centres, and in that I include museums. In talking about collaboration, I think there are three forms that we're talking about. First of all, there's this notion of communicating and translating research and development practices to teacher educators and teachers. So getting that sort of feeling of cutting-edge practice into the education sphere, to develop innovative pedagogies and to connect people, which is, and that is, and you'll see with these examples, connecting pre-service teachers, undergraduate students and PhD students in science and mathematics, teachers and teacher educators and high-performing scientists, so that there's a lot of linking going on. That's the intent of this project. What this session will talk about are three particular collaborations. One with the Gene Technology Access Centre, which is based in the grounds of University High, and it's been doing a lot of work with, incoming schools, looking at high-tech and contemporary examples of the application of gene technology and biology more generally. The Melbourne Museum, where we've got the project here is looking at collaborating with museum scientists, with our pre-service teachers, and also Quantum Victoria, which is the La Trobe project, again, with linking with pre-service teachers. One of the logic of what we're doing, the way I see it, is that there's been a lot of interest and a lot of publicity and a lot of activity around linking specialist science centres and science researchers and maths researchers with schools. There's a lot of outreach activity going on, and we've tried to do some mapping of this, and there would be hundreds of projects across Australia, and these have been foregrounded in a lot of the work that's been publicised around the chief scientist or other agencies. We've just been involved, for instance, in an assessment of the CSIRO scientists and mathematicians in schools project. One of the big things that we're finding there is that what those scientists and mathematicians bring into schools is not simply a knowledge of particular concepts. It's a way of working, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of engaging kids with inquiry and curiosity, and that's what teachers are saying and that's what they're saying. And so what we're looking for is some of that inspiration to come into schools. And what we're trying to do is in a way interpose our pre-service teachers in that link, so that we're putting pre-service teachers and in some cases undergraduate science students in between these research centres and practices and schools and students. And we're doing that through a sort of a layered approach. First of all, and I'm going to give this example of the GTAC really intended, and it's an example that would apply to some extent to the others. We're developing units of work, we're developing modules, we're developing practices using teams built around interested pre-service teachers, often with science and maths qualifications, so that they've got some background in that. Refining those using, in that case, the GTAC specialists, in other cases, other science and science educator specialists, trialling those in schools, and developing those into packages for pre-service teachers so that there's an ongoing product, as well as the process that we're developing. And this was, in fact, the GTAC model that we originally put up, going through from the development of those materials using teams that compose, and you'll see some of these being represented, through to developing activities, trialling them in education units, trialling them in schools, and some of those activity is going on now, has been going on. But as we move to the right-hand end, there'll be more of that going on in the next year there. And this project, this particular initiative is an example in the wider set of projects that really, as I see it, are linking STEM practitioners with STEM educators and pre-service teachers and teachers also in developing products, but also processes there. And so we're dealing with a very complex environment here, and I think that's the way it should be. We're innovating, and we're innovating in lots of ways. And so this set of presentations you'll see in this session is one aspect of that wider picture of linking STEM practitioners with STEM educators and pre-service teachers and schools. While the presentations are going on, here are some questions, and David Hoxley is going to run a discussion at the end. Some questions to consider that we'd like you to consider. We'd like the panellists who are going to be talking here to consider what are the STEM practices that we want to represent in schools and with our pre-service teachers? What are the benefits of them linking with scientists? And I'm including mathematicians in those. How can mathematical practice be authentically represented? And I'll confess here, we have had troubles sometimes looking for ways, legitimate ways of bringing maths centrally into this equation. And I was reminded in Leonie's talk, she talked a lot about maths. This is something we really need to think about. Are there lessons in this for how we can introduce contemporary science into schools? We're doing it through pre-service teachers, but of course it has wider implications. And with these collaborations, what are the interests served and are they sustainable? So the presentations are going to be in this order. A link or a project with Quantum Victoria, and Vaughan Prain from La Trobe is going to talk about that. The GTAC link, David Clark from the University of Melbourne will talk about that. The Museum of Victoria, Peter Hubber and Mary Gibson will talk about that, and then there'll be a panel discussion. So I'll hand over at this stage to Vaughan.
I just wanted to say that my office has started mapping all of those outreach programs. So we have a list of all of the national programs and as many of the state programs that we've come across. So we're looking at how do we get that out to the schools or in a form that will create value. So if you have any ideas on that, I'm very welcome if you want to send it through. It's not quite in the stage yet to be able to send it out. One of the other states is looking at building a database so it's accessible, all of those different activities. But I just wanted to say it is something that's a priority, it is in progress, and if you have any ideas on how we can make it more useful to you, I'm happy to hear them. So thank you. Sorry about that.
Just to steal your mic again, I'll just quickly say, this is awful. Perhaps if you could use the #ReMSTEP Twitter tag for any of your ideas on that. That can allow us to get it straight to Leonie's office very, very quickly without any academics as intermediaries. Just a thought.
It's me. And I am going to be brief because I really want the panel and your reactions. Today is really about it being interactive rather than sit and listen. Like the other three unis, La Trobe's had a long-standing set of partnership arrangements with a science centre on our doorstep in Quantum. I'm assuming most of you know about Quantum, and I'm going to talk about some of the things we're trying to set up, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and we've got the director of Quantum here, so she will be able to extend some of the points. So we've got this long history of partnerships, working with uni bridges where students can have link programs to get start a tertiary program. Charles La Trobe College is next to Quantum, so there's opportunities, incidental opportunities in the past and ongoing for PSTs, pre-service teachers, to interact with the centre. However, in terms of ReMSTEP and thinking through how we optimise augmenting past good practice, two areas of focus. How can we have, in a sustainable, plausible way, PSTs at Quantum? We have over 300 students graduating primary, secondary at Bundoora. So there's all sorts of challenges about how you orchestrate this, opportunities, challenges to make it optimally valuable for the PSTs and workable. So we're focusing on, well, what programs can occur with beside quantum staff, and what's the pedagogy? And we're interested in developing new approaches to teaching and learning that can achieve this in terms of science and maths. Sula will probably say a little bit more about this, but this is the kind of flavour of things we're attempting. STEM, we're looking at a program with Quantum where they are looking at a pedagogy for STEM in virtual spaces, linking up with FAR Labs, a program that David Hoxley was very significant in starting, which is a potential to access a whole lot of data where students can face-to-face interact with various kinds of experiments in a virtual context. Everyone knows about these science centres. Basically, they are incredibly busy. The whole rationale for them is that they are kind of hothouse incubators of interest. They are meant to have intensely novel and interesting things for kids to experience that couldn't normally happen in school. They survive by throughput. They achieve incredible things, but it's a challenge or a set of opportunities thinking about how best you can integrate their agenda with PSTs in a way that can be productive during their programs. So as Russell was saying, like what was just outlined, we're interested in working together to produce practices that can be effective in schools, that the PSTs are getting opportunities to directly experience innovative science applied in their course. We're also interested in having regional programs that can be delivered to Bendigo and other schools, and as I just said, developing pedagogies for virtual contexts. The last 3 points are really opportunities. Because of the intense nature of work in these science centres and quantum in particular, it's often hard for the follow-up to occur in terms of a school setting, a context where the initial excitement can be continued, evaluated, monitored, and we think there's a role for PSTs in professional learning contexts where they can continue and support the work that the centres do. The scope for integrating quantum programs into the learning experiences in actual courses, and we'll hear a bit more about that in some of the later presentations. So you formalise the relationship between what students have to do in their preparation program and quantum or other science centre experiences. And we're also all interested in effective dissemination, translation, so that there's a larger take-up of the good work. The 4 unis are all involved in pockets of excellence. How do you upgrade? How do you augment for Victoria and more broadly? As Russell pointed out, these are the strategies that we've been using and developing over the last 2 years. And as I've partly indicated, it's not an easy fix to think about aligning the goals of centres with and their methods, the demand for an intensive seeding experience or excitement experience for students over a short time frame. We've discovered there's considerable logistic challenges in just coordinating between PSTs and the provision of programs. Typically, though many things go on under the banner of quantum, typically we're looking at a compressed time frame of teaching and learning programs for primary and secondary teachers. P to 12, science and maths, a whole range of programs are available through quantum, but often it's a kind of intensive, short time frame compared to longer gestation of learning that we might want in school or fieldwork settings. The challenge then is how do we upgrade from a boutique participation of just some students having access to these intense, valuable experiences, and how can we upscale for PSTs more generally? And as everyone here will know, the time constraints in both areas are challenges to overcome. But as we're about to hear, I think all of this is worth working on and is one major way that we can contribute to improving the quality of science and maths teaching in schools, which is the ultimate purpose. I'll stop there, thanks.
We trust the fact that the clicker works. My presentation should appear shortly. Look, I'm David Clark. I work in both mathematics and science education research at the University of Melbourne. And we hope that any minute now my presentation magically appears. Terrific. My job, the job that I've taken on in speaking to you now, is to try and give you a feeling for what these collaborations actually felt like as a participant. I think that the partnerships with the specialist centres were almost the best exemplification of the realisation of the project's goals. That phrase, reconceptualisation, if we don't take it lightly, if we really ask ourselves what is it that's being reconceptualised, the sense of community and the community in which our pre-service teachers get to participate is being actively restructured in this particular project. And the one that I'm specifically looking at is the collaboration with GTAC. Now, I can't speak too highly of GTAC. GTAC is a phenomenal institution which is servicing, it's ambitious in its goals, and it services an absolutely remarkable population of both students and of teachers. You can go to their website, you'll find all the details there, but the bit I wanted to focus on was that we're talking about a facility that introduces 14,000 students and 1,500 teachers each year to the practices and concepts associated with cutting-edge genetic research. This is no mean feat, and it's something that is done, impressively and with a high level of competence. What do we bring to this? Well, what we're trying to do is, these are the sorts of programs that GTAC offers. It's a rich, sophisticated attempt to communicate to students very widely cutting-edge science. Now, I want to start with a diagram that Russell showed before, and the insider's perspective that I'd like to share with you focuses specifically on the way in which this very complex team functioned at the design stage. And you really do see here, encapsulated in the membership of that team, precisely the sort of integrated community that this project's all about. And people like Wendy's sitting there somewhere, I don't know, Wendy, if you want to wave your hand, but the enjoyment that we got out of participating in such a multiply qualified team, a group that brought together such different expertise, and I'm including the pre-service teachers in that, this was something that needed to be captured, and hopefully we have. Okay, so what I'm going to focus on initially is the process whereby units were developed in a way that collaboratively drew upon the expertise of the participants. And of course, the most notable participant, and the one on whom attention focused primarily, was our resident scientist, Ken. We're not getting any audio down the back there. Well, that's going to...
So why would a bee want to go to a flower that it can only get one resource from? And that's why you don't see native bees pollinating wattles very much. They go to the eucalypts because they've got both pollen and nectar. So there's a good story there.
I learned more about bees than I thought there was out there to be learned. And I come to this as a person trained as a physicist. And so I was beautifully positioned as a member of a reasonably scientifically literate person being introduced to the sophistication of this sort of dialogue. The pre-service teachers that participated, you could see in the nature of their participation just how intellectually energised they were by the type of discourse.
Into other, we have ecosystems coming off that, I think. But then from the alien versus native, we were thinking adaptations. And then the different types of tongues and
Yep.
tubes and hairs and
Yep.
legs and all that kind of stuff.
And the
Conversations about bees' tongues were not something I'd actually had to participate in before, but it became absolutely clear that this was an essential adaptive component. This is just to give you a sense of the very real dynamic of the sorts of things that we were constructing. Jacinta Duncan, who deserves every credit as the director of GTAC, took a very, very active leading role in the way these units were pulled together, and a huge thanks to Jacinta for the dynamo that she is and the insight that she brought to the project. But if you look at the complexity of the sorts of issues that were being captured in this collaboration of expertise, some very strange things emerged. It had not occurred to me that there might be a black market in bees. But in actual fact, this is it, this is true.
I was telling them that what the smugglers are doing is they're getting a pen a bit bigger than that, taking the middle out and putting 3 queens in it and putting it in their pocket and walking to Australia.
Really?
And so they had to train the beagles to be able to smell queen bees in the top pocket in the pen, which they did. So,
Should I be attaching this to colony?
Okay, now I'll just sum up now, but I don't know if that really does capture, it's a little bit cinema verite with a nice moving camera, but the experience of being party to that and of integrating conversations about cutting-edge science with pedagogical concerns and the different contributions that people made, it absolutely epitomises what we're shooting at, I think, in this particular project, and the extent to which we are both, to a significant extent, there were great triumphs, but there are also immense challenges. I mean, among the things that we learned, that's interesting. Now, go forward for me, please. That's better. Each of the various, there were 3 units that we worked on. There was the bionic eye, which developed a similar sort of a schematic framework. And there was also the stem
The
cell
exciting
project,
thing
in which
about
I
stem
didn't
cells
take
is
part.
not only the sort of potential and trying to work out how can you keep a cell as a stem cell or how can you make it form into a particular type of cell, is the fact that stem cells can come from lots of different sources. So really, we're interested in also trying to find out what type of stem cell works best in what type of situation. So
You get a student perspective on this now.
I think for me, coming into teaching and deciding to change a career that was in the real world in science and come into teaching, it was really important for me to get involved with ReMSTEP because it could link my world. So it could link my world with science, where I was dealing every day with the latest technology, and move it into the education world.
I definitely look at prescribed curriculum differently. I think there's a lot more flexibility within that to teach creatively and to incorporate and to go on tangents and develop the scientific skills outside the key knowledge.
We were really starting with the curriculum, where Megan was really starting with the science. So it was really nice to bring those two together, and that was really helpful. And I remember sitting down with her doing a mind map and just thinking, oh my goodness.
The challenge, and Vaughan alluded to this, the challenge of moving from a boutique experience to something that can be upscaled is a major challenge confronting this whole model. And you can see here's the stem cells folk madly brainstorming away, leading inevitably to the same complexity of conception, a complexity of conception that I think no individual teacher would ever be capable of encapsulating unless they found themselves part of this broader community where multiple expertise was contributed to the design process. We are now, and Russell alluded to this, we are now in the stage where some of the materials that have been developed are now being trialled in classrooms and collaboratively within the various programs that are participant in this collaboration. I think that the experience of there's a danger that we might see the production of the units as the ultimate product of this process. As a participant in these design meetings, the extent to which we can create opportunities for our pre-service teachers to engage in the sort of interactions that characterised these design meetings, that for me is going to be far more ultimately beneficial to the community than the undoubtedly high quality products that will be the result of that process. So what did we learn from it? We learned that collaboration can be incredibly inspiring, it can be fun, it can be productive, and the logistics are diabolical. When you've got that diversity of people coming together or attempting to come together on any sort of regular basis, inevitably compromises are made, and this was probably, it's certainly not trivial, but it may sound trivial. It's a mechanical detail, but it was one of the biggest challenges of the entire project. But the benefits, without question, totally justify the effort. So what have we learned in terms of going forward? As I said before, to value both process and product, it's not simply developing a mechanism for creating high quality resources. It's the participation by our pre-service teachers in that development process through interaction with people they might not normally see as part of their community. The compatibility of timetables is a major issue. We'll be addressing this, but there are tensions in those timetable compatibilities that need to be addressed from the outset. Clarity of role and responsibility. Recognising now, better informed as we are after a year's experience of doing that, what it is that each of the participants brings to that team. Mutuality of benefit, this is an interesting one. I came into it expecting to learn a whole bunch of stuff about science, and I did. It's probably one of the great educational experiences for me this year. What I hadn't realised was the extent to which the GTAC staff had come into the project expecting to be informed about innovative pedagogy. To some extent, their aspiration was realised, but not as fully as it might have been, because I don't think that's the way we conceptualise the partnership. But we've come out the other end in the recognition that we need to ask the question, what is it that each participant is going to gain, including the scientists? The other thing that must come into it is there must be some mechanism. We created these as boutique experiences for enthusiastic volunteer students. You can't create a sustainable program on that basis, and so mechanisms need to be found, and we all know about the delays that are inherent in the credentialing of any program in a university. But mechanisms must be found whereby these sorts of rich experiences can become an integral part of the structured program for our pre-service teachers. Thanks very much.
I request. Can I have the next presentation, please? Oh, thank you. I want to talk to you about a particular case today, and it's a partnership program, but what's missing is the partnership is often considered between pre-service teachers and another institution, but the partnership is also between, at the university level, between science faculty and education faculty. And I think quite often we are in silos at the university level, and this has been really rewarding to actually communicate and collaborate within our own institution between faculties. We've got an interesting activity. Part of ReMSTEP is to embed the ReMSTEP experience in a unit in our Bachelor of Science course. So it's not in our pre-service teaching course, Bachelor of Science course. And it is a unit of work of which Mary is unit chair. So I'll pass it on to Mary, first of all, to explain to you about how we have actually done that.
Do we have to click this?
Yeah, click that.
Okay, so I chair Community Science Project. It is actually a professional practice unit, but it is not your traditional professional practice unit where people go out on a placement and get straight work experience. Instead, the students have to work as a group. They have to collaborate with an organisation of their choice and complete a project. That can be incredibly broad, because if you look up what a project is, it could be anything. And because the science students have many different majors that they're doing, and there's double degree students, we can cover almost anything. One of the important things with this unit is, yes, the project will help students consolidate the skills that they've already got, to be able to use the skills they've already got, but also to develop more skills. And this is where this unit fits very well with the ReMSTEP project, because we've got a lot of teachers doing the unit. With teachers, there's a gap often in the earth sciences field, and so here, linking with the museum, we can get teachers, when we had 15 students participating in the project, filling in gaps in their knowledge. Only one of the students chose to do any earth science unit, so there's 15 students now that know a lot more about earth science than they did previously, and so for the teachers that will help them when they come and teach science, and we're talking mainly about the Year 8 curriculum here. We also include non-teaching students. Some of them are thinking about being teachers, so it gives them an introduction into what it can be like, but it is also important to show where different blends of students can learn to work with each other and help themselves with their future career. These are just some of the projects that students have done within this unit with different groups. With the unit, the project itself is a hurdle requirement, and they need to put in about 80 hours. But 50% of the assessment deals with their project. So they've got a project description, they present a poster and an elevator spiel at the end about their project, and this is in a public forum. And with the last one, we've got some videos to show you about that. But they can invite their clients, as I call them, they can invite their parents or other support group. We have some school people that come, and future students that can come and have a look at what it's all going to be like. And so Peter will show you some of the videos.
So for the students that took part, the entire unit was this project. It wasn't just one aspect of it. And we, as we've mentioned before, we're working with Melbourne Museum with their geology collection, and their front of house of the Melbourne Museum is a dynamic earth exhibit. But if you ever visited behind the scenes at Melbourne Museum, you notice quite quickly that there are a number of people in there that work other than just presenting at, putting together the dynamic exhibits. There are scientists that are working in the field behind the scenes. And so we had our students working with them. The program, in a sense, is getting the students connecting to the folk at the Melbourne Museum, the scientists and the educators there. And so we had 3 days of interaction. I also need to point out that we're talking from a deacon perspective, but there were also students from the University of Melbourne in their Masters of Teaching program. They had something different sort of orientation to what they had to do as part of the project. So we're just looking at what they did at from a deacon perspective. So there was working with the scientists at the back of the house there, or at the Melbourne Museum, and there were field trips. We did 2 iterations of this project. So early in the first trimester, they went to Phillip Island, the second group went to Organ Pipes. The project, in a sense, was to produce a digital resource, and we gave the students possible themes, and the group decided to develop a project of their own devices. So I'll just give you an example of the elevator spiel by one group. They had to produce a poster, and can we just run that video, please?
The elevator spiels were for 2 minutes, with 2 minutes
Can
of
we?
questions afterwards.
Yeah.
Jessica, Christina, Monique and myself, Virginia, here tonight. So our team has created a digital resource. This is the fourth one and the final one for tonight, and an associated lesson plan about erosion and weathering of rocks and how this in turn affects the rock's life cycle. The resources are scaffolded by the AusVAL's guidelines for a Year 8 Earth Science lesson. The resource we produce can be made available to schools, teachers and students via the Museum Victoria website. This will be particularly useful to science teachers that did not train in the earth sciences. The resource can be used with or without a visit to the museum and will equip teachers with the necessary tools and knowledge to confidently teach this topic in their classroom. So the video we've produced starts by setting the scene at Phillip Island in the location Motion Snow in Melbourne. The sand and rock formations in and out of the water are the products of thousands of years of weathering and erosion processes. The video and lesson plan covers the Year 8 AusVAL's curriculum, standards of science understanding and science inquiry in particular. The lesson plan would ideally be used as an introduction to the topic of erosion and rocks. Questions for the discussion are at the end of the video, which link into the lesson plan. And there is also an online quiz that we've created to use with this lesson plan to consolidate the material learned within the lesson and to also apply deeper thinking and for the students to apply their own knowledge further. Questions?
Okay.
You mentioned that there was part of it that would go in conjunction with a trip to the museum. What did that entail? Was it just like a kind of like a finding key information in the museum, or was it more? Well, I guess you guys explain that.
So we spent 2 days at the Melbourne Museum, and we were with some experienced geologists, and they showed us around through some of the artefacts, and we also got to go into the basement at the exhibition centre and have a look through all the stored things there. And then we had a field trip with the museum, and that was to Phillip Island, which is where we got all the footage from. And, yeah, all the things that we couldn't ever get.
So I guess like that whole experience tied together would be, gave us a bit of an understanding, because we were sort of in the position some teachers might be or students in, I guess, Year 8 might be, where you don't know a whole lot about geology. So that sort of experience gave us a bit of a background, and we learnt so much from the experts from the museum. And that then allowed us to, I guess, form this video that we've come up with and, I guess, understand the perspective of the students and the teachers and I guess, elaborate in certain areas we think they would find interesting.
Okay. So that 1 minute talk was associated with a question and answer section. These are some of the digital resources. We won't get time to show you, but the student groups were also given a mobile digital video kit, which comprised a GoPro camera and hard drive and a microphone. And so the students were able to produce high quality digital resources, which was part of their skill development as well. And you'll notice here, this was an interview with the scientist at the Melbourne Museum, and the other one, Weathering and Erosion, they're showing their video from Phillip Island, Weathering and Erosion. Okay, Mary, just quickly go through some
Throughout of
the
process, yep, we had a number of focus groups, thank you Lisa, and at the end we asked them a series of questions. We wanted Leichhardt style questions so we could have some sort of measure of their response, and there were equivalent open-ended questions as well so that we could tease out some of the answers. But the important thing to find out is whether or not the ReMSTEP project was working, and yay, it did, because you can have a look. Do you feel how interested were you in geology beforehand? 2.5. How much did your attitude to geology change as a result of the project? 4.2. How much did you learn about rocks and geology and its place in the curriculum? 4.2. How worthwhile do you think the project was for improving teaching geology? 4.5. And thankfully they will recommend the project to future recruits. And so into the future, there were a number of issues, and the previous speaker mentioned some of those. Alzheimer's, okay. With our particular students, some of the main issues were working in a group, would you believe? And so we've put some ideas into place to try and help them through that a little bit more. We had a few timetabling issues, which again we've had a lovely meeting, and we're going to make the timetables much stricter, and hopefully that will help the students. With 2016 and 2017, we're going to include some earth sciences staff that we have at the university as well as the museum staff, and also possibly go to a number of different organisations, and that can extend into 2018 as well, such as the mining industry, for example. Again, ReMSTEP, I think this was a wonderful project. I loved actually being at school, and I'm the only one that finished high school. My parents only went to, well, my father only went to grade 3, and I'm telling you this because education opened my world. So ReMSTEP, I think this is a great project. I was very lucky to have some teachers that were excited about their topics, and so I decided, oh, thank you very much. So with ReMSTEP, we can basically provide the architecture for students to learn a little bit more about what they're going to teach when they haven't had the time or sometimes the inclination to do that throughout the rest of their degree. If they know more, we're automatically going to have that higher standard, but being out there, they can produce that ripple effect to other teachers. They can excite their students, and hopefully promote innovation even more. But all of this is just the first step, and there are many other steps to the process, and so we always have to remember that, as our previous speaker also mentioned. Did you have anything else to add?
Just the other aspect was that these students were only in their second year of a 4-year double degree. So they haven't...
The teaching students.
Yeah, the teaching students. So they haven't had the curriculum units yet. So I think it's a nice entree for them to come into my curriculum course next year, having had this experience. And I'm pretty sure I'll have quite a confident group of students coming through, already knowing a lot